The wind on Blackwood Ridge doesn't just howl, it screams. They say only two things survive up there, the Grey Wolves and Thanos Mercer. Thanos was a man carved out of granite and regret, a man who buried his heart alongside his Winchester rifle years ago. He told the world he was too old for peace, too broken for love, and too dangerous for a woman like her. But when Clara Holloway walked through a blizzard to knock on his door, she didn't just bring the warmth, she brought a secret that would burn his world to the ground. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the true, gritty story of a love that waited in the shadows, and the blood that had to be spilled to keep it. The thermometer nailed to the porch post read 20 degrees below zero, but Thanos Mercer didn't need the mercury to tell him it was a killing cold. It was the kind of cold that snapped pine branches like dry bones and turned a man's breath into ice before it left his beard. Thanos sat in the rocking chair he'd whittled himself 10 years prior, staring at the iron stove in the center of the cabin. At 52, Thanos felt older than the Absaroka Mountains looming outside. His knuckles were swollen, scarred from years of trapping beaver and skinning elk, and his left leg carried a permanent stiffness from a Sioux arrow he'd taken in 76. He was a man of silence. He liked it that way. The silence didn't ask questions. The silence didn't expect him to be anything other than a ghost haunting his own life. His dog, a one-eared wolf mix named Buster, lifted his head from the rug. A low growl rumbled in the animal's throat. "Easy," Thanos rasped. His voice was like grinding gravel. He hadn't spoken a word out loud in 3 weeks. "Just the wind, boy." But Buster stood up, the hackles on his spine bristling. Thanos reached for the Sharps rifle leaning against the stone hearth. He didn't move with the speed of his youth, but he moved with a fluid, practiced economy. He blew out the kerosene lamp, plunging the cabin into darkness save for the orange glow of the stove vents. Then he heard it. Not the wind. A thud. A distinct, heavy weight hitting the wood of the porch, then a scratching sound, like a desperate animal clawing for entry. Thanos moved to the door, leveled the rifle, and threw the bolt back. "I ain't buying nothing, and I ain't got nothing to steal," he shouted through the timber. "Move on or be buried." No answer. Just a weak, pitiful scraping. Thanos cursed under his breath. He unlatched the heavy oak door and kicked it open, letting the blizzard roar into the room. A bundle of rags lay collapsed on his threshold. Snow had drifted over it, meaning it had been there for minutes, maybe longer. He looked for a horse, a mule, anything, but the whiteout swallowed everything beyond the porch railing. Thanos lowered the rifle. He grabbed the bundle by what looked like a coat collar and dragged it inside, kicking the door shut against the gale. He flipped the intruder over near the stove light. It wasn't a man. The hood of the buffalo coat fell back, revealing a mass of hair the color of dried wheat, matted with ice. The face was pale, nearly blue, with high cheekbones and lips cracked from dehydration. Thanos froze. His heart, usually a steady, slow drum, skipped a violent beat. He knew this face. It had been 10 years, and the softness of youth was gone, replaced by the sharp angles of survival. But he knew her. "Clara?" he whispered, the name feeling foreign on his tongue. Clara Holloway, the daughter of the general store owner in brave little Sweetwater. The last time he'd seen her, she was 18, wearing a yellow ribbon in her hair, watching him ride out of town, with a look that had haunted his campfires for a decade. She groaned, her eyelids fluttering. "Thanos." It was barely a breath, but it hit him harder than a fist. "You foolish girl," he growled, dropping to his knees. "What in God's name are you doing on the ridge?" He went into survival mode. There was no room for sentimentality in a blizzard. He stripped the frozen buffalo coat off her, tossing it aside. Her dress underneath was fine wool, but torn and muddy at the hem. He pulled off her boots. Her toes were waxy and white. Frostnip, but not gangrene. Not yet. He began to rub warmth back into her hands, his rough, calloused palms rasping against her smooth skin. She shivered violently, her teeth chattering so hard he thought they might crack. "Buster, move!" Thanos ordered. The dog stepped aside as Thanos grabbed a wool blanket from his cot and wrapped her tight. He poured hot water from the kettle into a tin cup, mixing in a drop of whiskey. He lifted her head, cradling it in the crook of his arm, an arm that had snapped necks and set traps, now trying to be a pillow. "Drink. Slow." Clara coughed, swallowing the liquid. Her eyes opened fully. They were green, piercing, intelligent green eyes that seemed to strip away his defenses. "I found you," she whispered, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. "You found a way to die," Thanos snapped, pulling back to sit on his heels. He felt suddenly crowded in his own home. "The pass is closed, Clara. No horse could make it up here." "I walked the last 3 miles, she chattered. "Horse broke his leg in a drift." 3 miles. Thanos stared at her. "In this?" "I had to." Thanos stood up, his knee popping audibly. He walked to the window, staring out at the nothingness. He needed distance. He needed to be the cold, hard mountain man again. Not the man whose chest was currently tightening, with a terrifying mix of concern and memory. "Get warm," he said gruffly. "Storm's settling in. You're stuck here till it breaks. Could be 2 days, could be a week." "Thanos," she said. He didn't turn around. "Then I'm taking you back to Sweetwater. To your husband." The silence that followed was heavy. "I don't have a husband anymore," Clara said. Thanos gripped the windowsill until his knuckles turned white. He didn't ask how or why. He just watched the snow pile up, burying the world, wishing it could bury the past just as easily. The storm raged for 3 days. For the first 24 hours, Thanos barely spoke. He tended to the fire, cooked stew from dried venison, and watched her. He gave her his bed, sleeping on a pile of furs near the door with the Winchester across his lap. Clara was resilient. He gave her that. She didn't complain about the cold draft or the hardness of the biscuits. She moved around the small cabin with a familiarity that unnerved him, as if she belonged there. She swept the floor. She mended a tear in his spare shirt without asking. It was on the second evening that the dam broke. Thanos was cleaning his skinning knife, the scraping of whetstone on steel the only sound in the room. Clara was sitting by the stove, holding a mug of coffee. The colour had returned to her cheeks, making her look dangerous. Beautiful women were dangerous. They made men do stupid things. Thanos knew this better than most. "You haven't asked me why I came," Clara said softly. Thanos didn't look up. "Don't matter. Once the snow clears, you're going down." "It matters to me." "I ain't a priest, Clara. I don't need confessions." "Stop it," she said, her voice sharp. Thanos paused, the knife hovering over the stone. He looked at her. "Stop acting like you're made of stone, Thanos Mercer. I know you. I remember the man who brought my father home when the river flooded. I remember the man who carved a whistle for my brother." "That man is dead," Thanos said, his voice flat. "Died a long time ago. Look at me, Clara." He stood up, towering over the small space. He gestured to his face, the jagged white scar running from his temple to his jaw, a souvenir from a grizzly bear that had nearly taken his head off in 79. He gestured to the grey in his beard, the stiffness in his leg. "I am 52 years old," he said, the words heavy. "I live in a shack at the edge of the world because I don't fit down there anymore. I smell like blood and pine resin. I got nothing to offer a woman, especially not a lady like you." Clara stood up. She was small compared to him, but she didn't back down. She walked right up to him, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of lavender water that had somehow survived the blizzard. "You think I came here for a gentleman?" she asked. "You think I walked through hell for a man who wears silk suits and talks about politics?" "I don't know what you want," Thanos grunted, taking a step back. "Money? I got some furs. You can take 'em. I want you." The words hung in the air, thicker than the wood smoke. Thanos laughed, a harsh, dry bark. "Me? Look at this place, Clara. Look at me. I'm too old for marriage. I'm too old for playing house. I'm set in my ways. I chew tobacco, and I sleep with a gun, and I don't talk for days. You're a dream I woke up from a long time ago. I've waited for you, Clara said. Her voice trembled, not from cold, but from emotion. You waited? Thanos shook his head. You married rich boy Arthur Halloway 6 months after I left town. I married him because my father was dying, and Arthur promised to pay the debts, Clara said, tears welling in her eyes. I married him because I was 18 and scared, and you left, Thanos. You just rode away. I rode away because I was nothing, Thanos roared, the anger finally cracking through. I was a scout with dirt under his fingernails and empty pockets. Halloway could give you a house. Safety. I could only give you this. He swept his arm around the dim cabin. And was I safe? Clara whispered. Thanos stopped. He looked at her closely for the first time. Really looked. He saw the way she held her left arm slightly stiff against her ribs. He saw the faint, yellowing bruise on her jawline that she had tried to hide with her hair. He saw the shadow of fear that lingered in her eyes even when she was smiling. A cold, dark rage began to coil in Thanos' gut, a rage far colder than the blizzard outside. Clara, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. What did he do? Arthur is dead, she said, her voice hollowing out. He died 3 days ago. How? Clara looked into the fire. He was a cruel man, Thanos. He drank, and when he drank, he used his fists. For 10 years I took it. I took it because I made a vow. She turned back to him, her eyes hard. But 3 days ago he came home drunk and angry about a gambling debt. He didn't come for me. He went for my son. Thanos felt the air leave the room. You have a son. Toby. He's 7. Where is he? Thanos demanded, looking at the door as if the boy might be out in the snow. He's safe. I hid him with the widow Miller in town before I left, Clara said. Arthur went for Toby with a belt. I couldn't let him. There was a struggle. The gun went off. Thanos closed his eyes. He understood now. She wasn't just a widow. She was a fugitive. I didn't murder him, Thanos. It was an accident. Self-defense. But his brother. She shuddered. You know his brother. Thanos' eyes snapped open. Boyle Halloway? Boyle? She nodded. The sheriff. Thanos swore. Boyle Halloway wasn't just a sheriff. He was a corrupt tyrant who ran Sweetwater like his personal kingdom. If Arthur was bad, Boyle was the devil himself. If Clara had killed his brother, accident or not, Boyle wouldn't wait for a trial. He would want blood. He knows I came this way, Clara said. He knows the only person in the territory I trust is you. He's coming, Thanos. Maybe not today in this storm, but he's coming. She reached out, taking Thanos' scarred hand in her trembling ones. I didn't come just for shelter, she said, her voice breaking. I came because you're the only man I ever loved, and because you're the only man strong enough to stop him. I've waited for you, Thanos. I waited 10 years to feel safe again. Please, don't tell me I'm too late. Thanos looked down at her hands holding his. He looked at the bruise on her jaw. The old man inside him, the one who wanted peace and solitude, died in that moment. In his place, the warrior woke up, the scout who had survived the Sioux Wars, the bear, and the winter. He pulled his hand away, but not to reject her. He walked to the wall and took down a heavy leather belt filled with cartridges. He buckled it around his waist. You ain't too late, Thanos said, the gravel in his voice turning to steel. And I ain't too old. He walked to the window, staring into the white abyss. If Boyle Halloway is coming up my mountain, Thanos said, then he'd better bring a shovel. The blizzard broke at dawn on the 4th day. The sun rose over the Absaroka range like a bloody thumbprint, staining the pristine white snow in hues of violent pink and orange. The wind had died, leaving a silence so profound it rang in Thanos' ears. Thanos didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window, watching the tree line. He knew men like Boyle Halloway. Boyle wouldn't come alone, and he wouldn't come legally. He would bring the deputies, who were nothing more than cattle rustlers he'd pinned a badge on. They would come heavy, and they would come to kill. Thanos! Clara was awake. She stood by the stove, wrapped in the blanket. The firelight caught the worry etched around her eyes. "Get dressed," Thanos said, not turning away from the window. "Put your boots on, and find anything heavy you can stack against the door." "Are they here?" "Not yet. But the pass is clear. They'll be riding up the switchbacks by noon." Thanos moved then. He grabbed his coat and stepped out onto the porch. The air was crisp, freezing the moisture in his nose instantly. He walked to the shed, his bad leg aching in the cold, but he ignored it. Pain was just information, and right now the information was irrelevant. He returned with a coil of wire, 3 bear traps, and a crate of dynamite sticks he used for clearing stumps. Clara watched him as he worked. He didn't move like the young man she remembered, the boy who had danced with her at the harvest festival. He moved like a machine. He strung tripwires across the narrow approach to the cabin. He buried the bear traps in the snow where the drifts were deepest, marking them in his mind with the precision of a map maker. When he came back inside, stomping snow from his boots, Clara was there with a hot plate of beans and biscuit. "Eat," she said. "You'll need the strength." Thanos looked at the food, then at her. He took the plate. "You should be halfway to Montana by now," he grumbled, sitting heavily. "If you'd taken the lower trail—" "I told you," Clara interrupted, sitting opposite him. "I'm not leaving you, and I'm not running anymore." Thanos chewed slowly. "You don't know what's coming, girl. A gunfight ain't like the stories. It's loud, it smells like sulfur and *tea, and people die screaming. You ain't built for it." Clara reached across the small table. Her hand, smaller and softer than his, covered his scarred knuckles. "I lived with Arthur Halloway for 10 years, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a shout. "I lived in a house where a wrong look could mean a broken rib. I lived in fear every single day. You think loud noises scare me? You think blood scares me? I've been bleeding for a decade, Thanos, just not where anyone could see it." Thanos stopped eating. He looked at her hand on his. The warmth of it seemed to seep right through his skin, thawing parts of him he thought were dead forever. "I'm sorry," he said. It was the first time he'd apologized in 20 years. I should have come back." "Why didn't you?" Thanos sighed, a sound like a crumbling mountain. "Because I was a fool. I thought I was doing you a favor. I was a drifter, Clara, a hunter. I had nothing. Halloway had the store, the land. I thought he could give you the life you deserved. You decided for me," Clara said, a flash of old anger in her eyes. "You didn't ask what I wanted. I wanted the man who carved whistles. I wanted the man who looked at me like I was the only star in the sky." Thanos set the plate down. He turned his hand over, interlacing his rough fingers with hers. "I'm old now, Clara. Look at me. I got scars on scars. My joints ache when it rains. I'm too old for new beginnings." "Then let's just survive the ending," she said fiercely. He looked at her, really looked at her. In the harsh morning light, she was beautiful, yes, but she was also hardened. She was forged steel wrapped in silk. And she was right. "All right," Thanos nodded. "We survive." He stood up, the chair scraping the floor. "Can you shoot?" "Arthur kept a Colt Navy in the drawer. I learned to use it when he was away." Thanos reached up to the mantel and pulled down a heavy revolver, a peacemaker. He checked the cylinder and handed it to her. It was heavy in her hands, but she didn't flinch. "2 rules," Thanos said, his voice commanding. 1, keep your head down. 2, don't shoot unless you see the whites of their eyes. Ammo is scarce. "And rule 3? Clara asked, cocking the hammer. Thanos cracked a grim, rare smile. A shifting of the beard that transformed his face. "Rule 3. If I go down, you don't stop to cry. You run. You run to the Widow Miller's. You get your boy, and you go west. You promise me." Clara hesitated. "Promise me," Thanos barked. "I promise," she whispered. Suddenly, Buster the dog leaped up from the rug, barking furiously at the door. Thanos moved to the window, peering through the crack in the shutters. Down the valley, about a mile out, 5 black dots were moving against the white snow. Riders. They were moving slow, picking their way through the drifts. Thanos picked up his Winchester. He kissed the stock, a habit from the war. "Here we go," he muttered. "Company's coming." The riders stopped at the edge of the clearing, about 300 yards out. Thanos watched them through the scope of his rifle. He recognized the lead rider immediately. Boyle Halloway. He was a big man, wearing a long duster coat and a flat-brimmed hat. A silver star glinted on his chest, mocking the very concept of law. Flanking him were 4 men. Thanos knew 2 of them, Deacon Jones, a man who killed for sport, and a tracker named Red. The other 2 were hired muscle, likely from the rail yards in Cheyenne. "Stay low," Thanos warned Clara, who was crouched behind the overturned table. "Mercer!" Boyle's voice boomed across the snow, amplified by the valley walls. "I know she's in there. Send her out, and I might just let you keep your skin." Thanos didn't answer. He cracked the window open an inch, resting the barrel of the Winchester on the sill. "You hearing me, old man?" Boyle shouted. "She's a murderess! She killed my brother! I'm here to execute the law." Thanos took a breath, steadied his aim, and fired. The shot cracked like a whip. Boyle's hat flew off his head, spinning into the snow. The horses reared, panic rippling through the group. Boyle cursed, clutching his head, checking for blood. There was none. Thanos had aimed for the hat. It was a message. "That's my answer!" Thanos roared. "Step onto my porch and the next one takes your ear." "You crazy old coot!" Boyle screamed, his face turning purple. "Kill him! Burn them out!" The men dismounted, scrambling for cover behind the trees and rocks. The serene morning shattered into chaos. Bullets hammered the log cabin, thudding into the thick timber walls, shattering the glass of the upper window panes. Thanos was calm. He moved efficiently, firing, working the lever, firing again. He caught one of the hired guns in the shoulder as the man tried to rush the woodpile. The man screamed and fell back. "Watch the back!" Thanos yelled to Clara. "I'm watching!" she yelled back, clutching the heavy revolver with both hands, aiming at the rear door. The gunfire was relentless. Splinters of wood flew through the cabin like shrapnel. A bullet pinged off in the cast-iron stove with a deafening clang. Thanos shifted position. He needed to thin their numbers before they got close enough to use fire. He saw Red, the tracker, creeping low along the fence line to the east. "Too easy," Thanos muttered. He didn't shoot Red. He shot the rope holding the logs on his wood stack. The pile collapsed, rolling down the slope. Red scrambled to avoid the avalanche of timber, jumping right into the patch of snow Thanos had disturbed earlier. Clang! The bear trap snapped shut. Red howled, a sound of pure agony that cut through the gunfire. "One down," Thanos grunted. But Boyle was smart. He knew Thanos couldn't cover every angle. While Thanos focused on the east, Deacon Jones had circled west, coming up a blind spot behind the outhouse. Clara saw the shadow pass the rear window. "Thanos, the back!" she screamed. The back door exploded inward with a kick. Deacon Jones stood there, a shotgun leveled. Clara didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She pulled the trigger of the peacemaker. The gun bucked violently in her hands, the recoil sending pain up her arms. The shot went wide, burying itself in the doorframe, but it startled Deacon enough that his shotgun blast tore into the ceiling instead of Clara. Before he could pump the shotgun, Thanos spun around. He didn't have time to aim the rifle. He threw it aside and drew his hunting knife, launching himself across the room with a speed that defied his age. He slammed into Deacon, driving him back out the door into the snow. They tumbled down the porch steps, a tangle of limbs and grunts. Deacon was younger and stronger, but Thanos fought dirty. He gouged at eyes. He bit. He used his weight. Deacon managed to get a hand on Thanos's throat, squeezing hard. Thanos' vision began to swim. He saw the grey sky, the falling snow. Bang! Deacon's head snapped back. His grip loosened. He slumped over Thanos. Dead weight. Thanos shoved the body off, gasping for air. He looked up to the porch. Clara stood there, the smoking revolver held in shaking hands, tears streaming down her face. She had saved him. "Get inside!" Thanos wheezed, scrambling up. A bullet kicked up snow inches from his boot. Boyle was advancing, firing his repeater from behind a pine tree. Thanos grabbed Clara and dragged her back into the cabin, kicking the broken door shut and jamming a chair under the handle. "You got him?" Thanos panted, checking Clara for wounds. "You got him, Clara?" "I killed him," she whispered, her eyes wide with shock. "He was going to kill you. That's the arithmetic." Thanos grabbed his rifle again. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, blood blinding his left eye. He wiped it away with his sleeve. "Mercer!" Boyle's voice came again, closer this time. "You fight good for a cripple, but you can't fight fire." Thanos smelled it before he saw it, the acrid scent of kerosene. Something heavy hit the roof, then another thump. "Torches!" Thanos realized. "They're throwing torches on the roof." The cedar shingles, dry despite the snow, would catch fast. "We have to go out," Clara said, panic rising in her voice. "We'll burn." "If we go out, they cut us down," Thanos said. He looked around the cabin, his sanctuary. It was becoming a coffin. "The cellar," Thanos said. "What?" "Root cellar. Trapdoor under the rug. It tunnels out to the creek bed. I dug it for this." He kicked the rug aside and hauled up a heavy iron ring. A dark hole opened in the floor. "Go," he ordered. "Not without you." "I'm coming, but I need to leave them a parting gift." Thanos grabbed the crate of dynamite sticks. He lit the fuse of one, counting seconds in his head. 1, 2. "Go, Clara!" She dropped into the hole. Thanos threw the lit stick towards the front door, then dove into the darkness of the cellar, pulling the trapdoor shut above him just as the world turned white. The explosion shook the earth. The front of the cabin disintegrated, sending logs and shrapnel flying outward into Boyle's men. Underground, in the damp dark of the tunnel, Thanos and Clara huddled together as dust rained down on them. They were alive, but they were trapped, wet, and the only way out was into the freezing creek, and straight into the sights of whatever men were left standing. "Is it over?" Clara whispered in the dark. Thanos checked his ammo belt. He had 6 rounds left in the rifle, 5 in his revolver. "No," Thanos said, his voice grim. "Now we hunt." The tunnel exit was a jagged maw in the side of the creek bank, hidden behind a curtain of frozen willow roots. Thanos and Clara tumbled out into the grey light, coughing up dust and smoke. The cold hit them instantly, a wet, biting cold that was far worse than the dry air of the cabin. They were in the creek bed now, shin-deep in slush and ice water. "Keep moving," Thanos rasped, grabbing Clara's arm. "If we stop, we freeze." Behind them, up on the ridge where the cabin had stood, a plume of black smoke rose into the sky, marking the grave of Thanos' life. He didn't look back. A mountain man knows that looking back is how you trip. They scrambled downstream, the canyon walls rising steep and slick on either side. It was a treacherous path. The rocks were coated in verglas, and every step was a gamble. Thanos led, his bad leg dragging heavier with every yard. The adrenaline of the firefight was fading, replaced by the throbbing ache of his old war wound and the fresh cuts from his brawl with Deacon. "They'll track us," Clara said, her teeth chattering. She was soaked to the knees, her skirt heavy with ice. "Boyle's got horses," Thanos grunted, scanning the rim of the canyon above. "But horses can't handle this creek bed. They'll have to ride the rim and look for a way down. That buys us an hour, maybe 2. Where are we going?" "The old trapper's line. There's a box canyon 3 miles east. Narrow choke point. Good rocks. And then?" "And then we make a stand," Thanos said, "because I ain't running to town to bring a war to the Widow Miller's doorstep." They moved in silence for a mile. The wind began to pick up again, whistling through the canyon like a mournful flute. Thanos watched Clara. She was stumbling, her face pale as parchment. She wasn't built for this. She was a storekeeper's daughter, a woman of hearth and home, not a creature of the wild. And yet she kept pace. She didn't complain. She had a grit that reminded him of the she-wolves he'd seen defend their dens against bears. Suddenly Thanos stopped. He held up a fist. Crack! A rifle shot echoed off the canyon walls. Thanos hissed in pain as a chip of rock exploded near his head, slicing his cheek. "Down!" he roared, tackling Clara behind a large boulder. Another shot whined overhead, ricocheting off the granite. "They found the rim," Thanos growled, pressing his back against the stone. He peered up. 200 feet above, a silhouette moved against the grey sky. "They have the high ground," Clara whispered, terror tightening her voice. "Yeah." Thanos checked his Winchester. "But they're shooting at a steep angle. Hard shot. They have to come down to finish it." He looked at Clara. She was shivering violently now, hypothermia setting in. If the bullet didn't kill her, the cold would. "Clara, listen to me," Thanos said, gripping her shoulders. "Up ahead, maybe 100 yards, the creek cuts under an overhang. It's a blind spot. You run for it on my signal. What about you? I'm going to draw their fire." "No!" She grabbed his coat. "You can't." "I'm slow, Clara. My leg is done. I can't outrun them on this ice." His eyes were fierce, burning with a desperate intensity. "I need you to get to that overhang. If I don't make it, you keep going. Follow the creek to the river. Don't stop. Thanos, go." Thanos spun around the boulder, raising his rifle. He fired 3 rapid shots up at the rim, not aiming to kill, but to suppress. "Over here, you buzzards!" he screamed. He broke cover, limping heavily toward a cluster of fallen pine trees on the opposite bank. Bullets kicked up water and ice around him. One tugged at his sleeve, another grazed his ribs, feeling like a hot poker branding his side. He grunted but kept moving, diving behind the logs just as a hail of lead chewed up the wood. He looked back. Clara had made it. She was under the overhang, safe from the snipers above. But Thanos was pinned. He lay in the snow, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He checked his body. He was bleeding from his side, a flesh wound, but it bled freely. He looked up at the rim. The shooting had stopped. "Mercer!" Boyle's voice drifted down, distorted by the wind. "You're bleeding, old man. I can see the trail from here." Thanos didn't answer. He ripped a strip from his shirt and bound his side, tightening the knot with his teeth. He closed his eyes for a second, listening. The sound of hooves. Faint, but getting louder. They weren't just on the rim. They had found a game trail down into the canyon. They were coming into the creek bed. The wolf was no longer at the door. The wolf was in the room. Thanos knew he had minutes, maybe less. He crawled through the snow, dragging his stiff leg, moving away from Clara's hiding spot. He had to lead them away. He made sure to leave a trail. Blood, disturbed snow, broken branches. A trail a blind man could follow. He found a spot where the canyon narrowed to barely 10 feet across. A natural bottleneck. He wedged himself between 2 boulders, facing the direction the riders would come. He checked his rifle. 3 rounds. He checked his revolver. 5 rounds. He pulled his hunting knife and stabbed it into the log beside him, within easy reach. He waited. The silence of the winter woods was heavy, oppressive. Then the crunch of snow. The snort of a horse. Boyle Halloway rode into view around the bend, flanked by 2 men. They were moving slowly, weapons drawn. Boyle looked triumphant, a cruel grin twisting his face under a new hat he must have taken from a dead deputy. "End of the road, Mercer," Boyle called out, halting his horse 20 yards away. "Nowhere left to run." Thanos leveled his rifle at Boyle's chest. "I ain't running, Boyle. I'm waiting." Boyle laughed. "You look like hammered asterisk to Thanos. Give it up. Tell me where the girl is, and I'll make it quick. You have my word." "Your word ain't worth the spit to polish it," Thanos spat. "She's a whore, Thanos." Boyle shouted, his veneer of lawman slipping. "She killed my brother. She stole his money." "She defended herself and her boy," Thanos yelled back. "You just want the land, Boyle. You want the inheritance." "The inheritance belongs to Halloways," Boyle roared, his face reddening. "Not to some bastard brat," she whelped. Thanos' finger tightened on the trigger. "You touch that boy, and I'll claw my way out of hell to kill you." Boyle sneered. "You won't have to. Once I'm done with you, I'll find her. Then I'll find the boy. Sweetwater is my town. There's no hole deep enough." Suddenly, a movement caught Thanos' eye. High up on the canyon wall, above the riders, a small avalanche of snow. Then a voice, clear and sharp. "Boyle!" Boyle and his men looked up. Thanos looked up. Clara was standing on a ledge, 20 feet above them. She had climbed the rock face, God knows how, with her frozen hands and heavy skirt. She stood there like an avenging angel, the heavy Peacemaker revolver held in both hands. "Look at me, Boyle!" she screamed. "Clara, get back!" Thanos shouted, terror gripping his heart. "You want to know about the boy, Boyle?" Clara yelled, her voice echoing off the stone. "You want to know why Arthur hated him? Why he beat him?" "Because he knew the brat wasn't his," Boyle yelled back, raising his gun toward her. "That's right," Clara cried. "Arthur knew. He knew because the boy has eyes like granite. He knew because the boy doesn't cry when he's hurt." She looked down at Thanos, her green eyes locking onto his. The look she gave him was filled with 10 years of secrets, 10 years of longing, and a truth so heavy it could crush the world. "He's not 7, Thanos!" she screamed, the tears finally freezing on her cheeks. "Toby is 9. He's 9 years old." The world stopped. Thanos froze. The math slammed into his brain like a sledgehammer. 9 years old. He had left 10 years ago, the autumn before I left, the night in the hayloft, the night I told her I was no good for her. Toby wasn't Arthur's son. Toby was his. The realization hit Thanos with the force of a physical blow. The boy he was fighting for wasn't just an innocent child. He was his blood, his legacy, the part of him he thought was lost forever. A roar built up in Thanos' chest, a sound that wasn't human. It was the sound of a father who had just found his reason to live, and the reason to kill. "Drop it!" Thanos screamed, swinging his rifle back to Boyle. But Boyle had heard it too. The shock on his face turned to pure malicious glee. "Well, ain't that sweet?" Boyle sneered. "A family reunion. Guess I'll kill the whole bloodline, then." Boyle swung his pistol up toward Clara. "No!" Thanos didn't just fire. He exploded from his cover. He pulled the trigger of the Winchester. Click. Misfire. The wet powder. Boyle fired at Clara. The shot chipped the rock inches from her foot. She scrambled back, firing blindly, missing the riders. Thanos didn't hesitate. He dropped the useless rifle and charged. He ran on a bad leg, through knee-deep snow, charging 3 mounted men with nothing but a knife and a revolver. "Kill him!" Boyle shrieked. The 2 deputies fired. A bullet punched through Thanos' shoulder, spinning him around. Another grazed his thigh. But Thanos Mercer didn't fall. He was powered by something stronger than muscle and bone. He was a mountain man, and he was a father. He slammed into the nearest horse, his shoulder driving into the animal's flank. The horse panicked and reared, throwing the deputy. Thanos was on him before he hit the ground. The knife flashed. The deputy didn't get up. Boyle wheeled his horse around, aiming down at Thanos. Thanos rolled, coming up on one knee, the Peacemaker in his hand. His vision was blurring, red creeping in at the edges. His hand shook. Boyle cocked the hammer of his Schofield. "Say goodbye to your bastard, Mercer." Bang. The shot rang out, deafening in the narrow canyon. Thanos didn't feel the bullet. He blinked. Boyle Halloway sat on his horse, a look of utter confusion on his face. A small red hole appeared in the center of his forehead. Boyle swayed, then toppled backward off his saddle, landing in the snow with a soft thud. Thanos turned his head. Clara was standing on the lower rocks now, smoke drifting from the barrel of her gun. She had climbed down during the chaos. She had taken the shot. The last deputy, seeing his boss dead and the demon-like fury of the mountain man, didn't stick around. He spurred his horse and galloped back the way they came, fleeing for his life. Silence returned to the canyon. Thanos dropped his gun. His legs finally gave out, and he collapsed into the bloody snow. "Thanos!" Clara was there in an instant, sliding across the ice, gathering him into her arms. "I got him," Thanos whispered, blood bubbling past his lips. "I got him." "Shh, stay with me," Clara sobbed, pressing her hands against the wound in his shoulder. "You stubborn, foolish old man. Stay with me." Thanos looked up at her. His vision was fading to grey. "9," he rasped. Clara nodded, tears dripping onto his face. "He has your chin, Thanos. He carves wood. He waits by the window when it storms." Thanos smiled. It was a weak, broken smile, but it was the truest one he'd worn in a decade. "Well," he whispered, his eyes closing, "I guess I ain't too old for a family, after all." Then the darkness took him. Darkness was not a wall. It was a tide. It pulled Thanos out to a black sea, then washed him back against the jagged rocks of pain. For days, he floated in that purgatory. He burned with fever. He saw faces from the war. He saw the bear that had scarred him. He saw Boyle Halloway laughing with a hole in his head. But every time the tide tried to drag him under for good, a voice anchored him. "Stay, you don't get to leave, not yet." Cool hands on his forehead, the sting of alcohol on his shoulder, the drip of water on his cracked lips. When Thanos finally opened his eyes and kept them open, the world was blurry. The smell was the first thing to register. Not pine and blood. Not the stale air of his cabin. It smelled of dried herbs, beeswax, and clean linen. He blinked. He was lying in a real bed with a quilt heavy enough to crush a man. Sunlight, warm yellow sunlight, not the pale winter glare, streamed through a window adorned with lace curtains. He tried to sit up. A bolt of lightning shot through his left shoulder, pinning him back down with a groan. "Don't you dare!" a voice said. Clara walked into his field of vision. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her green eyes, and her hands were red and chapped, but she was clean, wearing a simple blue dress that fit her properly. She looked like the Clara of 10 years ago, only stronger. "Where?" Thanos croaked. His voice sounded like rusty hinges. "Widow Miller's back room," Clara said, placing a basin of water on the nightstand. "You've been in and out for a week, Thanos. The doctor from Laramie said you had more lead in you than a pencil factory. He wanted to take the leg, too." Thanos's eyes widened. "I told him if he touched your leg, I'd shoot him with his own gun," Clara said calmly, dipping a cloth into the water. "So you still have the leg, but you've got a limp that'll make you famous." Thanos watched her wring out the cloth. "You got me off the mountain." "I made a traverse," she said, her voice tight. "I dragged you 3 miles to the main road. A mail coach found us." Thanos stared at the ceiling. He tried to imagine this small woman dragging his dead weight through the snow, fighting off the cold, fighting off the fear. He realized then that he had never been the strong one. He was just the hard one. She was the strong one. "Boyle?" Thanos asked. "Buried," Clara said, wiping his brow. The deputy that ran talked. Told everyone it was self-defense. Told everyone Boyle went crazy. The town is relieved, Thanos. The shadow is gone." Thanos closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of lavender. "And the boy?" Clara's hand stopped moving. "He's on the porch. He's been whittling, making a mess of Mrs. Miller's floorboards." Thanos swallowed hard. His heart hammered against his ribs, harder than it ever had in a firefight. "Bring him in." Clara hesitated. "Thanos, he doesn't know. Everything. He just knows you saved us." "Clara," Thanos said, opening his eyes and fixing her with a steady gaze. "No more secrets. I'm done with secrets." She nodded slowly. She went to the door and opened it. "Toby, come here, please." A moment later, a boy stepped into the room. Thanos stopped breathing. It was like looking into a mirror that twisted time. The boy had Clara's nose, but the rest was Thanos. The square jaw, the unruly hair that refused to lay flat, and the eyes, grey and granite, watchful and quiet. Toby stood by the door, holding a piece of pine wood and a small pocket knife. He looked at the man in the bed with a mixture of awe and fear. "Hello?" Thanos said softly. "Hello, sir," Toby said. His voice was quiet. "I hear you like to carve," Thanos said, nodding at the wood. Toby looked down at his hands. "Yes, sir. Mama says you're the best at it. She says you made the whistle." "I did," Thanos said. "A long time ago. What are you making?" Toby stepped closer, holding up the wood. It was rough, but Thanos could see the shape emerging. "A wolf. It's Buster," Toby said. "Mama told me about your dog." Thanos felt a lump in his throat the size of a fist. He reached out with his good hand, the scarred, calloused hand that had taken lives and set traps. He gestured for the wood. Toby handed it to him. Thanos turned it over, feeling the grain. "You're cutting against the grain here," Thanos whispered, tracing a line with his thumb. "That's why it chips. You gotta move with the wood, Toby. You gotta listen to it." He looked up at the boy. "You want me to teach you?" Toby's eyes lit up. "Can you?" "I got plenty of time," Thanos said. He looked past the boy to Clara, who was watching them with tears silently tracking down her face. "I ain't going nowhere." Thanos looked back at his son. "Toby, do you know who I am?" The boy looked at his mother, then back at the scarred man in the bed. He looked at Thanos' eyes, his own eyes. "I think so," Toby whispered. "Are you my pa?" Thanos let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for 10 years. A single tear leaked from his eye, running over the bridge of his nose and into the pillow. "Yeah, son," Thanos rasped. "I'm your pa. And I'm sorry I was late." The cabin on Blackwood Ridge was never rebuilt. The scars on the land were left to heal, covered by wildflowers and new saplings. Instead, on a plot of land just outside Sweetwater, a new house stood. It wasn't a fortress. It had big windows and a porch that wrapped all the way around, facing the setting sun. Thanos sat on that porch in his rocking chair. The stiffness in his leg was there, a constant companion, but it didn't bother him much. He had traded his rifle for a hammer and a saw. He built furniture now, strong, sturdy tables and chairs that people came from as far as Cheyenne to buy. He watched the yard. Buster, old and grey-muzzled, was sleeping in a patch of sun. Near the creek, Toby was running, holding a kite that Thanos had built him, laughing as the wind caught the fabric. The screen door creaked open. Clara stepped out, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She wore a yellow ribbon in her hair. She handed him a cup and sat on the railing, leaning against the post. She looked at him, her eyes full of a peace they had fought hell to find. "You thinking about the mountain?" she asked. Thanos took a sip of the coffee. It was hot, strong, and sweet. "No," he said. "I was thinking about something I said, a long time ago." "Oh?" Clara smiled. "You said a lot of foolish things, Thanos Mercer." "I said I was too old for marriage," Thanos rumbled. He reached out and took her hand, pulling her gently until she slid off the railing and into his lap. She curled into him, her head resting on his good shoulder. "I was wrong," Thanos said, resting his chin on the top of her head. "I wasn't too old. I was just incomplete." Clara kissed his neck. "And now?" Thanos watched his son playing in the grass. He watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and violet. He felt the warmth of the woman he had loved for a lifetime. "Now," Thanos said, closing his eyes and listening to the wind that no longer sounded like a scream, but like a song. "Now I'm just right." What a journey. From the freezing blizzards of Blackwood Ridge to the warmth of a family reunited, Thanos and Clara's story proves that some bonds are stronger than time, stronger than distance, and certainly stronger than bullets. Thanos thought his life was over, that he was a relic of a violent past, but he learned that it's never too late to fight for what matters, and you are never too old to find your home. If this story moved you, if you felt the cold of the snow and the warmth of the redemption, please hit that like button. It truly helps the channel. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. And tell me in the comments, if you were Clara, would you have waited 10 years, or would you have given up? I want to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.